With promises of better jobs and lives, people rush to cities. Data suggests half of the world's population now lives in cities, and by 2050, two-thirds will be in urban areas. Urbanization can fuel economic booms and motivate people to work harder. However, urbanization can also lead to congested roads, higher costs of living, strains on accessibility to public infrastructure, and other factors that may in fact push people into poverty. It is very clear that city builders have to consider these threats now. Otherwise, prosperous society and modernity can move further away from us. Through affordable social housing, improved links between cities through regional collaborations, better public infrastructure that meets our demand for clean, efficient, and comfortable living spaces, engineering offers options for us to face these urban threats and hopefully solve them. It is also key for countries to always look around at how others deal with these urban issues, so that experience can be learned and shared. In this episode of Mega Reality, we are speaking with engineers around the world and looking closely at real-life cases to see how urban threats are confronted. Hello people, Gerald here. We're live here in one of the largest construction firms headquarters here in Beijing, China State Construction, and I'm very privileged to have three guests online joining us. We have Yang Zhao from China State Construction Engineer Cooperation, Mr. Colin Foreman, the editor for MEED, which stands for Middle East Economic Digest, and also Mr. Found Yazbek, founder of 360 Tangent Engineer Consultancy, and also an American Concrete Institute fellow. So today, we're really going to look at urban threats that through fast urbanization and as human race marching into more economic growth, and we're facing a lot of challenges. But first, let's turn to Mr. Yan. So Mr. Yan, tell us a little bit from your background and your experience, how infrastructure help ease urban stress, such as like congested roads, longer commute time. Mr. Yan.
Improving infrastructure such as rail or metro is always an effective way to relieve urban pressure. It will greatly reduce the commute time for people living in the same region. Also, by improving road facilities, travel efficiency could be enhanced. Let me take an example here. The #1 route of Republic of Congo, constructed and operated by China State Construction. It is the largest infrastructure project in the history of China-Congo cooperation. It opens up the Mayong Bay virgin forest, which has been closed from the outside world for more than half a century. This road has shortened the travel time from the capital, Brazzaville, to its economic center, Pointe-Noire, from 1 week to just around 6 hours, which improves living standards of the local people and promotes economic development of the whole country and the whole region.
Definitely, we can see better connection, better roads will help to tighten regional development and, of course, to provide that part of better livelihoods to part of the world. And also in other parts of Africa, for example, the Nairobi-Mombasa Railway. Last year, I spoke to a single mom from Mombasa, but she works in Nairobi, and that railway, also constructed by Chinese firms, really greatly helped her to really work with a better paid job in Nairobi, while she could travel back to visit, take care of her child back in Mombasa. But it's not just about Africa. Let's turn to the Middle East. We're going to specifically look at one specific rail called Etihad Rail in UAE, United Arab Emirates, and that network will further link the other countries in the region to further enhance cooperation in the Gulf region. And now let's take a look.
Hi, my name is Jaboy Chako. I'm working as a technical manager in China State Construction. I have been in the construction industry for the past 25 years. Basically, I am from South Indian state, Kerala. Currently, I am involved in the existing Stage 1 Package 2A project, one of the prestigious projects of the UAE government. Kindly join with me for a quick tour at the rail site. The Etihad rail network primarily aims to bring better connection between GCC countries. The project is designed for both passenger and freight facilities, further enhancing the transportation system in the Middle East region. The network has about 1,200 kilometers in UAE, which is connecting from the Saudi Arabian border city Guaifar to Fujairah, the eastern city of UAE. This specific project, Package 2A, extends over 140 kilometers from the existing Stage 1 line in UAE to the proposed line in Saudi Arabia. The network currently uses a diesel traction with the potential to electrify in the future. The Etihad rail freight trains can reach up to 120 km per hour and the passenger train can travel up to 200 km per hour. The project has an environmentally sustainable design with protecting the ecosystem as it is. The project significantly benefits the Middle East region businesses with sustainable and efficient and reliable logistic solutions. The project would be the easiest and fastest transportation system between the GCC countries once it is fully operated. So the complete Middle East communities are awaiting to complete the whole project in full stretch. Honestly speaking, this is one of the mega projects completed by China State Construction in the Middle East, especially in the railway sector. With the successful completion, acquiring such a kind of vast experience, the team got more confidence and competence to enter such a challenging projects in the future. Also, we were able to mold a group of railway professionals with these projects, which can be contributed in the upcoming railway project.
Building railway links in the middle of the desert, but definitely it will further strengthen the transportation capacity in UAE and the future will link with Saudi Arabia that can definitely further boost the economic cooperation in that region among Gulf Cooperation Council countries. But now let's turn to Mr. Yazbak. So Mr. Yazbak, you have a great extensive experience in construction materials, but definitely when we see regional collaborations, I think it's definitely better opportunity for business for a lot of construction firms. But just speaking of the importance of regional collaborations, what do you see the reasons behind that? Why are regional collaborations are right now becoming more crucial for economic development, Mr. Yazbak?
There are many reasons for regional collaboration. I will talk about a few. The most direct one is a market expansion. If some countries that are close to each other pool their markets together, they can form an economic bloc or a regional trade agreement, and that facilitates the free flow of goods and investments, and it will create a larger market that is more attractive for foreign investment. Another thing is maybe resource pooling. If one of the countries will specialize in a certain part of the market and the other another part of the market, they can pool their resources together and create better goods. There's also knowledge sharing and innovation, and also maybe political stability and regional integration. It will create faster moving of people and goods. They can also maybe interlink their transportation networks, energy systems, maybe also digital connectivity. There's a lot of positives in regional integration.
Yeah, absolutely. For regional integration, as Mr. Yazbak said, like it kind of facilitate regional political stability and offer further economic growth and etc. So, Mr. Yan, you have extensive experience working overseas, not just here in China. So, what's your take on the reasons behind the regional collaborations? Why it's so important right now?
Through regional collaborations, industrial clusters could be formed, resource allocation could be optimized, and sustainable developments could be enhanced. Let me take an example here. The phase 1 of China-Thailand high-speed railway, in which China State Construction participates, is now under rapid construction. It adopts Chinese high-speed railway standards for design and construction. Materials are required to be produced according to the Chinese standards as well. This railway will link China, Laos, Thailand in the very near future. The China-Laos railway has already begun operation. While the world is relatively fractured these days, regional collaborations will provide necessary stimulus to trade, tourism, cultural exchange, and a high level of certainty in turbulent times.
So definitely we can see, like Mr. Yan's example, for China has been playing an increasingly key role in facilitating globalization, but definitely there are different views towards regional collaborations or international collaborations. So, Mr. Foreman, from your journalistic point of view and standpoint, what are some comparisons between different countries' attitude towards like regional collaborations or going global, Mr. Foreman?
Yeah, I think it's important to just really say that the sort of economic underlying principles of regional cooperation have been there for a long time. And certainly if you look at the rail projects, just as an example, a lot of these things have been on the drawing board for many, many years, and that their economic benefits have been long recognized. I think it's important to say that the pace of regional integration changes over time. So for a number of years in sort of the late 2010s, there wasn't really that much drive for regional cooperation. There was quite a bit of tension within the region between certain countries and various diplomatic disputes, and we didn't see much cooperation. Since January 2021 and the Al-Ula agreement in the GCC, we've seen a lot more integration between the countries in the region, and that's really accelerated a lot of these projects that we're talking about today. So, you know, that may change in the future, but certainly at the moment there's a strong emphasis on regional projects and regional integration. And yeah, I think that's an important point to note. Just that the pace of development changes just depending on what's going on regionally, but also internationally. I think there's a little bit across the world. There's a little bit of a pull away from globalization, and I think as a result of that, as your previous speaker was saying, that people are looking to integrate a bit more regionally as a sort of a counterbalance to that sort of retreat from globalization.
But as Mr. Foreman, as you mentioned, like the increasing signs of regional collaborations in the Gulf region, the GCC countries, and China is playing an increasing role in that part of the world, like helping build railways and helping investing to build new cities. And but definitely, I mean, there are a lot of criticisms towards China's infrastructure investment in other countries. Even some people will consider it as a debt trap, a diplomacy. So what's your take on this?
I think it's slightly different for the Gulf. I think some of the countries that you mentioned where there's been accusations of debt trap have been countries that don't necessarily have that much financial firepower and much resource behind them. I think it's slightly different when you're talking about the Middle East, particularly the countries in the Gulf, where they've got large energy reserves, they've got strong finances. So there's not really that issue of debt trap. I think what you'll find is if you do have a Chinese company coming in and providing some sort of finance, it's more on a commercial basis than a development aid kind of basis. So I don't think that debt trap conversation is necessarily relevant for certainly the oil exporting countries in the Middle East. But of course, as you mentioned, there has been criticism from other of it in other parts of the world.
But just from because you've been studying BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and you've been writing articles about that, just from your evaluation, speaking of this, China-led globalization, if we just zoom in Middle East, what can it offer to the region?
An awful lot, actually. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of projects that are planned. There's some very ambitious development programs across the region, most notably at the moment in Saudi Arabia, where there are hundreds of billions of dollars worth of projects planned. And the inevitable question that you have whenever you have a project is, A, who's going to build it and who's going to help pay for it? And China's a very big country, a very large economy, and it's also keen to export and has developed a lot of the skills that are required, certainly in developing very large projects over the last 4 decades in their home market, and they're looking to export their skills. So I think it's really a good fit at the moment, as China's completed a lot of very large infrastructure projects domestically. It's looking to take that expertise into international markets. And in markets such as Saudi Arabia, you have a country that wants to do their own large projects. And I think that the Chinese resource and expertise is something that's very much needed.
But we can definitely see now China is eyeing for like larger markets in the Middle East, and a lot of other countries are also trying to kind of get benefits from a more integrated Middle East. And earlier this year, the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan paid a visit to the Middle East and even promised a even grander network project, a railway network project that not only connects the Gulf countries but also later expand to India. That's a very long way, between India and the Gulf. So, what's your take on this, actually, Mr. Foreman? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. I mean, I read the report that you're referring to. I think the report was a little bit misleading. I think the report said that it was a rail network in the Middle East that would then by sea connect to India. So I think what they were talking about there, and I don't really want to put words in people's mouths because I wasn't there, but I think what they would have been talking about is the railway projects in the Middle East, then connecting to India via seaports, probably in the UAE, from UAE, Saudi Arabia, and possibly also Oman. So the inference there was that it would then be a railway that would then cut through. I mean, the quickest way to go through would be through Iran and Pakistan, which wouldn't need to go through the Gulf. So I don't think that made sense from a rail-only solution. I think what they were talking about there was a rail network that would then have access to seaports that would then connect to India.
But let's turn to Mr. Yazbek. Speaking of all these like grand infrastructural interests from world leaders like the U.S. or China, economic powerhouses, but just who are going to invest this? You are also involved in consultancy business. And speaking of the material side of it or the technology side of it, do you think these projects can be paid off in the longer run or in the short term?
That's a difficult question. I think it's very local also. In where our expertise lies, maybe Colin and myself, is in the GCC countries, and there's a lot of financing available internally and a lot of social housing happening internally. And the payoffs are more on the country level, not at the project level. Although in micro markets there is also a very commercially driven approach with private money being poured into developments, where the return is definitely being studied and realized, especially in the last couple of years, where we've seen another housing boom both in the UAE and in Saudi Arabia, as an example.
Yeah, as Mr. Yazbek said, like the housing booms, like as we've been talking about railway networks and improve the regional transportation system, that will definitely facilitate people's movement, and there will be a lot of people might visit the Middle East or other parts of the country where they have enhancing public transport. But then home prices are surging, of course, and a lot of around the world, some countries even are prone to natural disasters. Sometimes housing issues are becoming more urgent. And we're now going to Algeria, and we're going to look at a case about social housing. And now let's take a look.
Bonjour. Je me présente, je m'appelle Belash Marouane, je suis ingénieur en génie civil, je travaille au sein de l'entreprise CSEC chargée de la réalisation du programme 20 000 logements LVADL. Actuellement, aujourd'hui, nous sommes sur le site 3000 site 1, situé à Bouinan, wilaya de Blida. Le gouvernement algérien a lancé ce programme afin de résoudre le problème de logement et de permettre aux familles ordinaires de procurer un logement. Laissez-moi vous montrer notre chantier qui est en cours de réalisation. Notre entreprise a construit des logements depuis près de 20 ans, au cours desquels nous avons amélioré nos méthodes de travail en permanence. En 2015, nous avons innové un nouveau système de construction rapide en aluminium pour la réalisation des logements. Le projet actuel utilise des plaques en aluminium. Comme vous pouvez le voir, l'ensemble de la structure de l'immeuble est composé des murs à ossature porteurs qui répondent au plus haut niveau de résistance aussi. Les moules intérieurs et extérieurs sont connectés par des boulons, tandis que les supports sont connectés avec les moules du plafond par des têtes de démontage rapide, permettant de retirer les moules tout en conservant les supports. Actuellement, cette technologie a été utilisée pour construire plus de 30 000 logements. La mise en œuvre de cette technologie a permis à 30 000 familles de déménager dans leur nouvelle maison jusqu'à 6 mois avant la date prévue et de réaliser leur rêve. Le projet sur lequel je travaille comprendra des équipements tels que les espaces verts, les équipements de proximité, les équipements scolaires, des terrains de foot et des aires de jeu, offrant un environnement de vie confortable pour les résidents de ce projet.
Better housing, better living environment are at least what I care the most. And let's turn to Mr. Yan. And in your opinion, what are the fundamental demands and needs for people in terms of buildings and constructions? Really a place to live or a place to eat?
Well, with rapid development of the economy and significant improvements of people's living standards, the requirements for constructions are no longer just functional. In my opinion, the requirements include the integration of architecture and nature. For example, the Alcove Courtsville and Lakeville projects are very different from the normal public housing projects in Singapore. The design of each unit of the residence is unique. Partition wall interior design has been added to the house design. Residents have more flexibility of the layouts of their rooms, and at the same time, there is a picturesque roof. Residents have the feeling of living in a garden.
So definitely, I can feel that. Here in China, there's a new concept called Park City. So there will be parks built around residential neighborhoods. But of course, for public housing, that's where prices are controlled. That will be the better news. But for a lot of other parts of the world, when they have a better surrounding environment, that will maybe further drive the home prices up and crazy. So Mr. Furman, what's your take on how important is it to make housing available to all? And are there any ways, like for your interviews or your pieces on, to help with the housing demand right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things to pick on there. There's a lot of property that's being built in the region, which is really investment properties, which is slightly different, I think, to what you're talking about, which is more on the social housing side of things. I think the social housing, there's really a demand for good quality housing at scale. And I think that, as you were saying earlier, there's a lot of expertise that can come from other markets that can come in terms of just resource and appetite for taking on such large projects, and B, people that have completed similar projects previously. And I think that's why you're seeing Chinese companies taking part in these schemes quite a lot now, because they've recently had experience in their domestic market doing very large-scale housing projects and developing techniques, as you saw in that video.
Yeah. And Mr. Yazbak, like Mr. Foreman touched on a very important ideas, like how Chinese firms have been accumulate experience from China. I've learned a lot of Chinese properties right now are going like more sustainable and going green, and they are using like low emissivity glass and lighter materials that will increase like efficiency of building constructions. But speaking of material side, are there any technologies or newer materials that can somewhat help firms to control their like cost and maybe help stabilize home prices?
You're touching on a subject that's very dear to my heart. I'm a materials expert, and over the last maybe 20, 25 years, we've seen a drive to reduce carbon footprint and increase productivity in construction. And we've had multiple experiences in the UAE with the Chinese companies and other companies also on infrastructure projects, single-family dwellings, high-rise buildings, where we've used technologies to reduce carbon footprint of concrete, which is my specialty. I can talk about it for too long. I do not want to bore your viewers also. But yes, there is a lot of new technologies also coming from 3D printing, which is a very nascent technology, which Chinese companies have pioneered in the Middle East also with one of a few first projects. There's also modular construction, enhanced precast construction, reduction in waste, many different technologies. It's a very exciting time to be in our industry.
Mm-hmm. But then, about speaking of home prices, but I do understand, like in the Middle East region, money is not one of the biggest issues there. But speaking of the home prices, can any of these, eco-friendly materials in the future, some would curb the cost of building, like residential buildings, or at least make it more cost efficient?
Yes, definitely, especially when you source them locally. If you're going to the end of the world to source a green product, it's not as green as you would think. But there's a big drive now to source products either locally or regionally at least. And that will, one, reduce the carbon footprint and also reduce the cost in terms of transportation and maybe reuse of waste products also.
Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, when we have a stable home, place to live, and when we have public transport that can help us to commute elsewhere, and sometimes we also think about travel different parts of the world. We're thinking about travel internationally. And now let's turn to Southeast Asia, where a brand new international airport is being built in Cambodia, and we're really going to look at how the developing world is coping with today's urban threats. And now let's take a look.
Hello everyone, my name is Hong Amata. I'm from Cambodia, and now I am an assistant project manager in Lai Châu International Airport in Cambodia. Lai Châu International Airport is located in Congested district south of Phnom Penh, capital city of Cambodia. The actual area of this project is 2,600 hectares. It includes head house, North Pier, Energy Center, and viaduct are in our scope. After the completion of this project in 2024 October, it will be the biggest airport in Cambodia with a class of 4F and can take more than 30 million passengers per year. One, here is our viaduct. There are 50 piers which made from architectural concrete that give a high level for our bridge. Lai Châu International Airport project was signed by Chinese and Cambodian Prime Minister. After the finish of this project, it will be the biggest airport in Cambodia. We can attract more tourist investors to promote the Cambodian economic growth. I am honored to be a part of this construction team. This airport will contribute to Cambodian economic growth, social development, and also globalization. I am also delighted with the China advanced technology and also their management experience. Will give us more confidence to finish this project as soon as possible to welcome our friends from all over the world.
So definitely we can see that international airport is being built, and it's still skeleton, but in the future is a beautiful architecture and hopefully can bring economic boom to Cambodia or whatnot. So Mr. Yan, you have you worked on other projects similar to building an international airport in Cambodia. So what's in your opinion, what will building like international transport hub bring to economic development, especially in the developing world?
Well, firstly, the development of international transport hubs will attract more investments and resources, promote employment and industrial upgrading. Secondly, the establishment of transport hubs will strengthen the connections between countries and regions, which provides a broader platform for communication and cooperation. Let me take another example here. The Nasir Riyadh International Airport in Iraq is now under construction. After completion, it will become the third largest airport and the largest cargo hub in this country, which is of great significance for promoting regional economic developments. During construction and operation periods, this project will provide hundreds of jobs to the local people.
So definitely it can provide better job opportunities to the local people and of course kind of more opportunities for economic growth. But Mr. Yazbek, you mentioned about like material cost, like when you can source it locally, you can definitely reduce the cost. But then speaking of like right now, parts of the world are becoming more integrated. Do you think it's still relevant to grow internationally while the world is so fractured? and while, for your supply chains, are there any challenges that you can see?
There are still many reasons to believe in globalization, and not only regionalism or internal views. Just a basic business decision is a market expansion. If you look at the global market, then your market is multiplied by X. You look at diversification. You reduce your risk by not being exposed to one part of the world. Or even access to talent and resources. Many countries have faced now aging populations, and they need either to export productivity or import new workforces. Competitive advantages. You take the best out of your part of the world, add it to somebody else's ideas or technologies, and then you can produce better products. And also supply chain resilience, which you touched upon. I can source something locally for a cost issue, but then if I need to double my supply chain for resilience, if I'm facing local issues, I need to have a different supply chain, maybe from an international source, which is coming from a manufacturing background. This is something that you have to do all the time.
Well, that sound would also help with inequality or poverty in terms of better jobs or better business.
By creating opportunities in different parts of the world. If I'm sourcing something from a country that is not doing as well as my own country, I can create job opportunities there and create more wealth, definitely.
Yeah. So, Mr. Foreman, speaking of globalization, right now it's really standing at a crossroad. Western-led globalization versus China-led globalizations. Have you ever noticed the difference between the two different modes, Mr. Foreman?
Certainly from a Middle East point of view, traditionally been a little bit more focused on the West, but I think what we've seen over the last decade is it's become a bit more eastward facing. I think that's for a number of reasons. I think it's primarily economics driven. I think the markets in the East have become a lot larger over the past couple of decades at least, and that's created a lot of trading opportunities for businesses in the Middle East. So they're a lot more eastward facing than they had been in the past. So I don't think there's necessarily competing forces there in terms of one or the other. I think it's just the fact that there's markets to the east and there's markets to the west. And just to go back to what you were saying about aviation and transport, I think the Middle East very much sees itself as a hub connecting those two markets, whether it be east and west, and I think also in terms of north and south. And if you look at most of the countries in the region, they've got very strong focus on becoming transportation hubs for the future. So in Dubai, you'll see that the Emirates Airlines results that were just announced just over a week ago, they recovered very, very strongly, and their business is now better than it was pre-pandemic. In Saudi Arabia, you see grand plans for doing a very large new airport in Riyadh. They want to get themselves to become a global aviation hub. There's plans to expand other airports in the region. So I don't think they see, I don't think the region sees a world that's either a China version of globalization or a Western version of globalization. I see themselves playing a very key role in a global economy, and that includes markets in the east, markets in the west, and also markets in Africa, markets to the north, and markets to the south. So I think they really see themselves as a linchpin for global trade.
And for the Middle East region that you're more knowledgeable with, it's more like China at least is offering more options for the region to grow, to connect with the rest of the world. But then again, some Western countries do see China as a strategic competitor and have been competing with China. And there have been a lot of criticism from the West on China's involvement in developing countries, as well as its expanding infrastructure plans in overseas markets. So why? I mean, why there always being criticism, or why does the West never say any good about China, Mr. Foreman?
I don't think it's fair to say that the West never said anything good about China either. But it's not my place to comment on that. But I think what we've seen, certainly since I've been covering the region over the last 20 years, if we look at Chinese involvement in projects and work in the Middle East, certainly 20 years ago, it was generally fairly low level. So it was supplying materials. It wasn't particularly high value services that they were providing. It tended to be a lot more labor focused and lower end project work. Certainly in the last decade that has changed, and I would say now that you're seeing Chinese companies really offering cutting edge solutions and much higher value products, which, and when I say products, I also mean services, which is starting to compete more on a like-for-like basis to what you're seeing coming from some of the more traditional markets, say in North America and Europe. So there's a bit more competition there coming through it, and that particularly kicks in, especially in things like the tech sector, where there's a lot of concern over sort of Chinese tech companies getting involved and how the different systems, particularly when it comes to issues like security, interact with each other and the management of data. So I think that's why you're seeing some of those tensions playing out, and it's just really because the sort of the nature and way that different companies compete and the expertise and services they provide has evolved with time.
Oh, definitely. And there's an old saying here in China is like competition sometimes will also create benefits to the people. The hope is that actually through a rising China, and there will be more options and more benefits to the people, and maybe provide better livelihoods to people around the world. And thank you so much, gentlemen. And we had a great and insightful discussion. And we had Yang Zhao from China City Construction Engineer Corporation, Mr. Colin Foreman, Meet Editor, and of course, Mr. Yazbek, the founder of 360 Xinchen Engineer Consultancy. Thank you so much, guys, and hope that I can bring you back in the near future, that I can talk more about construction and engineering and how it can help the world grow. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Before we go, I have something more to say. Western accusations, including that China engages in debt trap diplomacy through the globalization scheme and the Belt and Road Initiative, sometimes I would consider is short-sighted. While countries like the U.S. have made grand promises for railways and airports, little progress has been made. China has never leveraged other countries' debt for influence. The criticism from some Western countries comes from pure envy and even surprise. They never thought that a country like China could help the world confront challenges and threats while the human race wants more growth. This is Mega Reality, in which we share stories and insights on how construction and infrastructure help the world grow. We'll be back.